to this computer. This is a shir on Likutei Sichos, Chelek Chaf, book 20 of Likutei Sichos, the Sicha of Chayei Sara, the third Sicha. Put on your seatbelts. Let's jump in. The pasuk which says, "Vayehi," so we're introduction here. We're talking about the special mission that Avraham gave his trusted servant Eliezer to go and find a wife for his son Yitzchak. So he sends him back to his familial house, and Eliezer has to look for the proverbial needle in the haystack. He has to look for a girl from that region, which should be appropriate, a good shidduch for his master's son, Yitzchak. How's he going to find such a girl? So he makes a little thing in his heart, and he says, I'm going to daven to Hashem. And if I find a girl who comes out, and the girl, when I ask her to drink some water, she's going to say, I'm going to give you water, I'm going to give your guys water, but not just I'm going to give the humans water. I'm going to give the camels water as well. Aha! If that kind of girl comes, then we're going to know that that's the girl that is destined to marry Yitzchak. So Eliezer doesn't even finish the prayer that he's making, this prayer to God to bless him to be able to find the right girl, the girl that's going to offer water to his camels, and he'll know that this is the right girl, after finding out she has the right lineage, of course. He doesn't even finish saying the prayer, and Rivka is coming out. So the Medrash says that this kind of instantaneous reaction and response to his prayer, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai says, there were three that were answered immediately to the request of their mouth. Eliezer, the servant of Avraham, in this case, he says, I hope if the girl's coming out, and the girl was coming out, Hashem answered him before he even finished praying. Moshe, Dichtiv, Vayehi, Moshe and Shlomo. So Eliezer, this story here about Moshe, it says, when he had that standoff against Korach, and he said, if whatever I have done is by the behest of Hashem, let the earth open up. Let a new creation happen, and the earth shall open up. The earth opened up. He just finished saying that prayer, and boom, immediately, instantaneously, the earth opened up. Shlomo, when he finished building the Beis HaMikdash, he says, Kechalot. It said, the pasuk says, Kechalot Shlomo litpalel Hashem. When Shlomo finished praying to Hashem, v'ha'eish yarda min hashamayim, and the fire came down from heaven. So, to consume the fire came down to consume the sacrifices. So therefore, what we're saying here is that these three were answered instantaneously. You know, for some of us, sometimes we ask for something and it takes a little while. These three people were answered immediately. So from the simple reading of the Medrash, it seems that the fact that they were answered immediately has to do with these three select individuals. These three people both had the same identical reaction to Hashem, that Hashem answered, responded to what their mouth uttered, especially when the Medrash says that these three had this kind of response and puts them all together. It seems that there must be something unique about these three individuals. We have to understand, how can you really put all three individuals in one inclusionary statement? They were so different. Eliezer was a servant of Abraham. Moshe was the key conveyor of Hashem's message, Hashem's star prophet, if you wish. Shlomo was the builder of the Beis HaMikdash. They're different people. They're not. You can't just include them all just like in that one statement. That what would be this? What would be the unifying factor between all three that would make them answered more quickly by Hashem when they pray than anybody else? The question becomes even bigger, as commentaries ask. When we say that they were answered immediately, so actually, if you look in this week's parsha, you'll see that in the prayer of Eliezer, there's an advantage, there's a quickness, a swiftness in the response of Hashem, even more than the response to the prayers of Moshe and Shlomo. Because by Eliezer, it says in the pasuk, by he who terem kila ledaber. It was before Eliezer even finished to speak, and Hashem already had the girl on her way out to him. However, by Moshe Rabbeinu and by Shlomo the king, It was after they davened. It says, but Moshe says, when he finished saying, Hashem, if I'm doing your bidding, let the new creation be created and the earth open up and swallow up Korach. After he finished, the earth opened up. Shlomo Melech said, let Hashem come and show that that the Beis Hamikdash is pleasing in his eyes. When he finished, and Hashem should accept our praise, when he finished, the fire came down, which means that Eliezer had a certain advantage in his prayer over the other two. So we have to understand, why is Eliezer, you would imagine that of all three, Moshe, Shlomo, Eliezer would be the lowest in terms of stature. He was a servant of Avram, to the extent, I'm just throwing this in, and the Rabbi doesn't point this out, but to the extent that Avram says, as much as you're my trusted servant, if you don't find a girl back there to bring back, I still can't make a shidduch with you because you're from a different pedigree. You're not from the same family as mine. So he was a lower level in terms of the hierarchy, yet he's answered quicker than Moshe and Shlomo. How does that work? Also, we have to understand, if it's got to do with the special virtue of these three people, what about other people? Why only these three? Well, weren't there many tzaddikim that should be answered immediately, as great as Eliezer, Moshe, Shlomo, right? So it means it would have to be, and that calls our attention to the fact that there's the Medrash really says not only these people are answered immediately, all tzaddikim are answered immediately. But what the Rebbe derives from these questions is that it would seem it's not the people that are answered. There are other people like them. The other tzaddikim should also be answered like them very quickly. It's the content of what they're praying for that makes the request that they asked, Hashem responds to it immediately. So now we have to understand what's so special about these three people in terms of the tefillas, in terms of the prayers that they are praying, that they had this special gift and advantage that Hashem responds to them immediately. So first, paragraph 2, let's understand, what does it mean to have an immediate response from Hashem? What does that show on? In other words, you would say, well, especially in our era of speed, how quickly can somebody fulfill your request? You're not going to go to a certain restaurant because it takes them too long to get the food out. I have to wait 15 minutes from when they took my order to get the food. We don't have 15 minutes to wait, or something like that. But having your prayer answered right away, is it just a question of function? I don't want to wait. We want Mashiach now. We don't want to wait. We don't want to wait. But it's just a question of function, that right away, as soon as I asked for it, I got it? Or is there something deeper being represented by this immediate answering? So let's look, first of all, how the Rambam describes the concept of being answered right away. The Rambam in the book of, in the laws of Teshuvah, has fascinatingly lays out in halacha, the 6th halacha of the chapter, and the 7th halacha of the same chapter, lays out the incredible gift of doing Teshuvah. And first he says, the Rebbe presents it here in what he says in the later halacha, and then he says what he says in the earlier halacha. In the later halacha, it's chapter 7, halacha 7 in the Rambam, says the Rambam, that one of the virtues of a Baal Tshuva and the advantages is that Hashem answered, he calls out to Hashem and he's answered immediately. To paraphrase the language of the Rambam, how great is the advantage and virtue of returning to Hashem, doing Teshuvah. Yesterday, this person was separated from Hashem, the God of Israel. He could have called out and Hashem wouldn't have responded to him. Today, he cleaves to the Shekhinah. He's connected, cleaving, attached to Hashem's presence. He calls out and immediately is answered. So that sounds fantastic. But the halacha before that, halacha vav, the Rambam said something so similar that we would not understand. Why did he repeat it again in the halacha we just quoted? What did he say in the previous halacha? Previous halacha, the Rambam said that the tshuva is so great, mikarevet et harchokim, it brings close those that were distant. Yesterday, this person was despicable in the eyes of Hashem. Meshukah, it's disgusting. Umeruchek, distance. V'to'eva, and abominable. V'ayom u'ahu, v'nechmad, karov, yedid. Today, he's beloved. He's delightful to Hashem. He's close. He's friend of Hashem. So the Rambam said that, and one would assume that if you're so close to Hashem, that's why Hashem answers you right away. So there in halacha 6, when the Rambam said, yesterday he was so despicable, today he's so beloved, he should just say, and that's why Hashem listens right away. Hashem loves him. Of course, he cries out. Hashem says, yes, how can I help you? Why does the Rambam then finish that halacha and then say that one of the greatnesses of the Baal Tshuva is that yesterday he was separated from Hashem, and now Hashem answers right away. Now he's connected. Now he cleaves to Hashem, is attached to Hashem, and Hashem answers right away. It seems like there's two levels here. There's the belovedness of the someone who does teshuvah, which is first stage, and then there's the connectedness, the veikut, the connectedness, the attachment that the person has to Hashem, which means that he's answered right away. So here's what the Rebbe says is what the Rambam is telling you. He's telling you there's two levels in teshuvah. One is that in the first halacha says the Rambam, you become close to Hashem's presence. As he says, Gedolat teshuvah shemikarevet et adam l'shkina. Teshuvah is great that it brings somebody close to Hashem. And how does that express itself? By the fact that yesterday he was abominable and hated. Today he's beloved and close. Then there's a second halacha. The next stage of that is, even greater than that is when you ascend in getting closer to Hashem by doing teshuvah. How high and advantageous the advantage of teshuvah is. Not just that you become ahuv nechmad karov yedid, you become beloved and close and pleasant to Hashem, but you become mudbak bashchina, not just close, but totally attached. There's a difference between being close and between dveikut, between totally attached as one, glued and united as one entity with the Shekhinah. When you become one entity with the Shekhinah, now says the Rebbe, the Rambam in that second level where he talks about the veikut, about attachment to the Shekhinah, the Rambam there says that's why you're answered. The Baal Teshuvah is answered. He calls out and is answered immediately, because in this halacha which he talks about the veikut, about today, the person who does teshuvah is not like yesterday he's separated from Hashem and now he's connected to Hashem, not just close to Hashem, but attached to Hashem. That makes a result of calling out to Hashem, and Hashem answers him immediately. How so? Paragraph 3. The explanation here is understandable like this. Why does it take time for a recipient to receive a response from the one he's petitioning? You ask somebody for something, it takes time to get it. The fact that it takes time is a sign that the receiver is not totally seamlessly integrated and connected with the giver. There needs to be a giving, which needs to leave the premises of the giver, needs to be received by the one who's receiving it. So when you have two separate entities, two separate items, I need to send it from my domain, it needs to come to your domain. If, however, they're part of one seamlessly integrated, wholesome reality, so there's really no time that is required to go from one to the other. They're just two parts of the same thing. That's why when we talk about the first level for Shuvah, where we talk about somebody being cut, somebody being close to Hashem, if you're close to Hashem but not attached to Him, closeness, okay, you can be close and Hashem can answer you, but the immediacy is not there. When, however, the second level of tshuva that Rambam discusses, where he talks about the veikut, he talks about being totally attached to Hashem. If you're totally attached to Hashem, then Hashem answers in a way of total seamlessness. Then the answer is right away. It doesn't have to go to another entity. You're so one with Hashem, the moment you just cry out, it's responded to. Baal Teshuvah means that he becomes so close to Hashem that Hashem is one with him and he's one with Hashem. We use the word Baal Teshuvah. We don't mean the way it's used today. A person who didn't do mitzvahs and now he's doing some mitzvahs or coming back to Hashem. That's a social. That's a social tag. Teshuvah means returning to Hashem. Somebody could be keeping all the mitzvahs, but he's far from Hashem because he's not doing it with the proper kavanah. Teshuvah means it's a state of being, and somebody could now, so to speak, be Baal Teshuvah, but he's not doing it with the passion. Somebody could be dati, and he's not even Baal. He hasn't even started serving Hashem. What we're talking is the true feeling of Teshuvah, which is return to Hashem, and a person is passionately enmeshed and one with Hashem at the highest level. Teshuvah me'ava, teshuvah me'ava rabba. Passionate love for Hashem, the thirst for Hashem that comes with Teshuvah. When it's done properly, he says you become one with Hashem. Hashem becomes one with you. And then there's seamless integration. The tefillah is answered right away. Says the Rabbi here in paragraph 4, the same way it is about the persona, about the person doing the praying. That's so ekvinen, the fact that he calls out and Hashem answers him right away. It's got to do with the fact that he's attached and mudbak, attached to the Shekhinah. Similarly, when we look at the content of what's being prayed for, we'll see that each of these three items, what Eliezer prayed for, what Moshe prayed for, what Shlomo prayed for, are also all items that relate to diveikut, relate to cleaving, closeness, attachment to the Shekhinah. And that's how we'll be able to, here's how we're going to explain it. What was Shlomo HaMelech praying for? Shlomo HaMelech was praying for the revelation of Hashem's Shekhinah, Hashem's holy presence, that Hashem should dwell in the Beis HaMikdash. So he was talking about the cleaving of Hashem, the attachment of space, holy space. There should be a space where Hashem's presence is manifest. The second prayer was Moshe Rabbeinu. What did he pray? That the earth should open up so it should be known, Ki Hashem shalachani, that Hashem has sent me. The fact that Hashem's presence has totally pervaded me. I'm the shliach Hashem. I'm the messenger of Hashem. Shluchosh l'adam kamato, and just like I'm one with Hashem, whatever I said is really what Hashem has said through me. The tefillah of Eliezer is a request for Hashem to help him bring about the nisue, Yitzchak and Rivka, the marriage of Yitzchak and Rivka. So the marriage of Yitzchak and Rivka is also about the connection of Torah. We'll soon see. Why is the marriage of Yitzchak and Rivka? What does it have to do with the connection of Hashem to Torah? We'll get there. So let's first start paragraph 5. The revelation of Hashem's presence in the world in a way of unification, the way of oneness, is first and foremost the way that Hashem reveals His Shekhinah in the Beis HaMikdash. What was the meaning? What were the mechanics, the dynamics of the revelation of Hashem's presence in the Beis HaMikdash? What happened there was not that the space remained space, physical space, material space, and Hashem was, so to speak, hovering over it. What happened there is that space became one with Hashem's presence, and the space itself, that the space in Yerushalayim where the Beis HaMikdash was built, became physically holy space, became one, unified with Hashem. To the extent that people came there, it says they were able to see with their physical eyes that this physical space is batal, is subservient, is nullified, is transparent to Hashem, who's revealed there, and Hashem is by definition higher than space. So the space became higher than space. As we know famously, it says that the Aron, the place that the Holy Ark was placed, didn't take up any space, which was an impossibility. Just briefly, the Kodesh HaKodashim had to have its dimensions. So let's say it was 20 from wall to wall, but you needed to have 10 from the wall to the Holy Ark, and from the other wall to the Holy Ark. The Holy Ark itself took up a few amma, 2.5 amma. But if you measured from wall to wall without taking the Ark into account, it was 20. If you measured from wall to ark, 10 plus 10, 20. But then you measured the Ark, you got 2.5. But yet if you measured from wall to wall, you didn't get 22.5. So there was a discrepancy there. The Ark took up space, but yet it didn't take up space. It's an impossibility. It's a physical impossibility, which is only able to be as a result of Hashem's presence. Hashem is higher than space, and not just Hashem is higher than space, and therefore where Hashem comes down in the Beis HaMikdash, space disappears. Hashem is higher than space and not space, so He can be there can be space, and there can be not space, and somehow it all coexists, because Hashem is what we call nimne hanimnaot. It's impossible to say that anything is impossible for Hashem. Nimna means that something is held back. It's held back from being held back. It's impossible to say that something is impossible for Hashem. There can be space, there can be not space, there can be space and not space altogether. And that's what they saw in the Beis HaMikdash. So when people came there, they were able to see physically that Hashem was somehow manifest in that physical space in a godly way. So that's dveikos. That's Shlomo HaMelech's prayer was about having Hashem's presence in a way that it become totally seamlessly one in the place that it was. What was Shlomo HaMelech davening for? Bano baniti beit zvulach. He said, Hashem, I've built a house for you to be. A base for you to settle in the worlds. And even though we know that the heavens and the heavens of heavens cannot sustain you, Hashem. There's no room for you in the heavens even. But this house that I built for you is going to be a dwelling space for you. And he davens that it should be the case. Right away after that, Hashem answers him. Right when he prays, the fire comes down and shows him that Chvod Hashem malei tabayit, that the glory of Hashem fills the house. Because what he was praying for was the connection, the dveikos, the cleaving, the integration of Hashem's Shechina in the physical space. He was asking for dveikos. That was his request. The nature of the prayer was for oneness with Hashem, and Hashem answered in a way of oneness. When you're one with Hashem, it happens immediately. You don't have to wait. Now the next item, Moshe Rabbeinu's prayer. So let's understand what prophecy is, what Moshe Rabbeinu was praying for, that he should be vindicated. It should be obvious that what he had done was really from Hashem. The revelation of Hashem's Shekhinah to people in a way of hitachdut, in a way of oneness, that Hashem becomes one unified with the person himself, where you see that manifest, that's in prophecy. Prophecy is the concept of Gilas Sodola Vadavan. Hashem reveals his secret to his servants, the prophets. It's a very fundamental aspect of our belief, like the Rambam says, Miyisodei Hadat, from the fundamentals of our religion, Leida is to know Shahakel min Abeit B'nei Adam, that Hashem endows human people with prophecy. In other words, the revelation of prophecy in a way it means that the prophet becomes one and cleaves to the word of Hashem, to the point that the word of Hashem comes and encloses itself in their intellect, in their grasp. They see it in their vision of their prophecy, and also they understand it, they perceive it in their mind, and they express it in their speech. So really, what the concept of prophecy is, that Hashem, so to speak, takes over their human apparatus of conceptualization, of vision, and then ultimately of speech, and they speak what Hashem is speaking through them. And this is what Moshe Rabbeinu was praying. Moshe Rabbeinu was praying to have that oneness with Hashem, that it should be obvious to all that what he's saying is Hashem saying it through him. So he was answered right away. He was asking for that unification, that dveikut, and the nature of the prayer therefore was one, that when you talk about dveikut, when you talk about oneness with Hashem, there's an immediacy in the response. What he was asking for was, with this it shall be known, ki Hashem shalachani, that Hashem sent me. To do with all these good deeds, to do all these deeds that I did. I appointed my brother Aaron to be the high priest, and so on. And then he said, if these people will die like regular people die on their beds, Lo Hashem shalachani, it's a sign that Hashem didn't send me. If Hashem creates a new creation and the earth opens up its mouth and swallows them, then you will know that Hashem has sent me. In other words, this is not Moshe Rabbeinu asking for a proof. This miracle, he's not praying for proof about the general Torah of Moshe, about the general Torah, or that the Torah and mitzvahs emanate from God going through Moshe at the mountain of Sinai. Here, Moshe Rabbeinu is asking for something much more specific, and he's asking that it should become evident that he is shlucho kemoto mamash, that he is literally an agent, a direct agent of Hashem, who's like Hashem when it comes to all the things that he has done, the appointments that he's made, that Korach challenges him and says, you did it for personal reasons. He says, I want Hashem to show that I'm just a direct conduit for what Hashem has told me to do. To give Aaron the high priesthood, to give his children the vice priesthood, to make Eli Tzafan the leader of the clan of Kahas. Korach wanted to have these positions. And here the Rebbe says something which I'm not sure I fully understand. Yesh Shlomo says the Rebbe, that this is an additional virtue over the rest of the Torah, which we understand to be the Torah of Moshe, and it's from Hashem. Here, Moshe Rabbeinu is asking to be vindicated that the things he has done is a direct shlichus, a mission and a prophecy of Hashem, specifically even within the general context of the Torah. He wants Hashem to show that specifically these acts which have been challenged are direct acts of prophecy, direct acts of shlichut, of mission by Hashem. In other words, a kind of a nevuah, which nevuah means that Hashem becomes totally one. Hashem hijacks, almost not hijacks, but takes over the apparatus, the system of the prophet. So because he's asking for that, he's asking for Hashem's, to show how he's one with Hashem in terms of the acts he's done, of the appointments of kahuna. So the nature of the prayer was such that it was also answered right away, because he's talking about dveikos. He's talking about achieving this highest level of oneness with Hashem. So when you're at that level of oneness, there's the immediacy of the response. So it's not just the people that are asking, but it's the nature of what they're asking for. No, it's not. No, he doesn't have to be Baal Tshuva, but he was connected to Hashem like a Baal Tshuva. He had the dveikos, and also he's asking. The Rebbe is pointing out here: don't look so much at the people. Look at what the nature of the request was. They're all tzaddikim, all three, of course. But why are we singling out by all tzaddikim? They should be answered right away. Why are we singling out these three? Because the nature of what they were asking for is also a dveikos nature. They were asking, the Beis Hamikdash is asking that Hashem's presence should be obviously manifest as one with the world, that the holiness of Hashem should be take over and be one with that space of the Beis Hamikdash, that the space should become holy. Moshe Rabbeinu is praying that his own human aspects of intellect and speech should be shown that they're just a conduit for Hashem's prophecy. They're one with him. And so therefore they get answered right away. But the only thing we need to still go to is to understand, what about Eliezer? What's the nature of his prayer? So the third thing that I believe is a flask, because he's going to elaborate on it. The third thing, the way Hashem's presence is revealed in the world. We said there's space, that's the Beis Hamikdash. There's person, that's the Navi, prophet. And then there's the Torah. So the fact that Hashem, Hashem and the Torah are all one, and this has to do with the tefillah of Eliezer. Now listen carefully. What has it got to do with the prayer of Eliezer? Eliezer was praying about marriage. What has marriage got to do with Torah? Well, the Torah says to get married, but what's the connection between Torah and marriage? Eliezer? Yeah. It was before the time that you could say Yehudi or not Yehudi. He wasn't technically a Jew, but he was the right hand of Avraham Avinu.
Yes.
You could be for sure. It's Hasidei Yisraelim. You asked a good question. Was he circumcised? I don't know. Did we see anyway? Was he Ayim Nimol? Was he circumcised? You know what? Yes, Moshe Avraham Avinu had to circumcise all his servants. Right. We don't see anything. I don't remember any. Not necessarily that everybody who was circumcised by Avraham was considered Jewish. Also, his servants were circumcised. But he was definitely on the same path of serving Hashem. Again, there wasn't any technical classification there as Jew or not Jew. Paragraph 6. So let's talk about the parsha of Eliezer, the servant of Avraham. Our sages tell us, Yafes sichatan shel avdei avot mitoratam shel banim. We find that this story of Eliezer and the making of the match for Yitzchak with Rivka is repeated several times, because you have where we read, the Torah tells us where Avraham instructed Eliezer to go get a wife. Eliezer traveling and saying, how am I going to find her? And he says, Hashem, please send me out a girl and I'll ask her for water. And if she says, I'll give you water and also your camels, I know it's the right girl. He comes to Laman. He comes to the house of the parents of the girl of Rivka, and he starts telling him the whole story again. My master sent me and he said, and I did this and I did that. He comes back to Avraham and he tells him the whole story. I came and this was or he tells Yitzchak, he came, and this was the girl. Kids, it keeps on being repeated. You could just say ditto. You know, he got there and he said, as above. So the Chazal tell us that Hashem finds beloved, sichatan shel avdei avot, even the chatter servants of our forefathers even more important than Toratan shel Banim, than the Torah of the children, because when Hashem gave the Torah to the Bnei Yisrael, he speaks very tersely. There's many aspects of halacha of Torah Shebal Peh that are derived from a very small, from a hint in the Torah, from an extra letter, from an extra tag, from an extra crown. And here it seems to be like Hashem has plenty of words available in the Torah to tell this story a few times, which tells us that Hashem has more pleasure, so to speak, or yafeh, it's more beloved to him. This discussion about, because the forefathers are so beloved to him, that even what's happening with their servant, saying this, saying that, is beloved to him. From the fact that those two things are juxtaposed, they're compared, Sichatan shel Avdei Avot, the talk, the chatter of the servant of our forefathers, and it's compared to the Torah that was taught to the children of Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, to the Bnei Yisrael after Sinai, means they do have a connection between them. What's the connection between the story of Eliezer finding a shidduch and the giving of the Torah? So Chassidus explains that the concept of the discussion here, Sichatan shel Avdei Avot, the chatter and discussion, the narrative of the servant here, Eliezer, especially when we're talking about the match of Yitzchak and Rivka, is the general objective and describes the general mission of Torah mitzvahs. And that's why it's said with such length, because it's symbolic of something. What is it symbolic of? It's symbolic of the whole Torah mitzvahs. It's a very general and basic concept which led, because of its symbolism, led to the actual giving of Torah mitzvahs to the Jewish people at Sinai. What do we mean? So let's understand, let's remember what was achieved, what happened at the giving of the Torah at Sinai. We've said many times that was the time when the connection between the higher worlds and the lower worlds was able to be effected. Till the giving of the Torah at Sinai, there was a, so to speak, decree, a gzeira, which meant that Elyonim lo yedu letachtonim, the higher worlds cannot totally come down to the lower worlds. Tachtonim lo yalu le'elyonim, the lower worlds cannot come up to the higher worlds. So, for example, you could not take a physical item and it would become holy. You could use a physical item as a mitzvah, maybe symbolically, but you could throw it out afterwards. To take, let's say, a piece of animal hide and write the holy words on it, and it becomes a mezuzah, which becomes intrinsically holy, you can't just throw it out. Sneh would become holy. That was achieved only at the giving of the Torah at Sinai. Symbolically, when Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai, when Hashem went down to Har Sinai, when it says about Moshe, he had to go up towards Hashem, that was the merging of the two worlds. In other words, through the giving of the Torah at Sinai, there was now the joining of the Tachtonim, of the lower worlds, with the higher worlds, with godliness, which is higher than the world, and they can become unified as one. As we see literally when we talk about the fulfillment of mitzvahs, that after Matan Torah, through doing a mitzvah with a physical thing, you're able to achieve an effect that the physical item should become a receptacle, become a vehicle for transmitting and for receiving and holding godliness. They become items of mitzvah, tashmisha kedusha, items of holiness, till they can actually become a chayfetz liktush. They're literally an item that becomes holy. For example, a sacrifice. You take an animal and you dedicate it to bring to the Beis Hamikdash. We can't do it today, but in the time of Beis Hamikdash, that animal literally became so holy that the only thing you could do with it is burn it up on the altar, and it literally went up to Hashem. It didn't remain a regular animal. The animal became a holy animal. Same thing that we see in tefillin and mezuzahs, which is different, by the way. For example, tzitzis. Tzitzis is something that we do a mitzvah with. It doesn't become intrinsically holy to that extent like the tefillin. You just don't want to be denigrated, so you don't want to throw it out just like that in a dirty garbage. But technically, you could, even the strings, you could technically put them in a bag and put them in the garbage. Many people try and treat it more respectably, but it doesn't become a chayfetz of kedusha. before the giving of the Torah, nothing could become fully holy. It's a physical thing. Hey man, how did that piece of the cloth, that piece of parchment just become holy? The only way it can become holy is if Hashem says, I want this piece of parchment to be used for a purpose. When you take it and use it for that godly purpose, Hashem, so to speak, Hashem's spirituality pervades that thing, and now you can't distinguish between the physicality of it and the spirituality, the godliness of it. The godliness of it has kind of invaded the DNA of this particular, the cells of this particular item. With food is a little more essence of it. So the preparation and the introduction to this connection of giving the Torah started already from before. Where does it start? It starts by the marriage of Yitzchak and Rivka. Why is that? When Yitzchak and Rivka got married, besides the fact that Yitzchak was holy because he was the son of Avraham, but he was also, don't remember, he was the first one that had his circumcision at 8 days old, which was the greatest connection with Hashem, because Hashem makes the connection himself with an 8-day-old who cannot interfere with the connection by his own intellectual grasp of it. He doesn't grasp it. All the great things he got from Avraham made Yitzchak a really holy individual. Especially, we're talking, when did this marriage come to be? After Yitzchak was offered up as a sacrifice, which means he reached, in the end, he wasn't the last minute, but he was ready. He had all the service of Hashem of being a sacrifice. He was ready. He went willingly to the whole thing. He's considered a pure sacrifice to Hashem. Who is Rivka? Rivka comes from the most base environment. Besuel was a gang, was a liar. Lavan was a trickster. Padan Aram was outside Israel, and it was considered a disgusting place. And so to the extent that Yitzchak was not allowed to go there because Yitzchak cannot tolerate chutz la'aretz outside Israel. He needs to stay in Israel. So he's taking the holiest of the holy Yitzchak and marrying him off to somebody who comes from a very lowly position. So we understand that the message, that the mission that Eliezer has to bring Rivka from her place in chutz la'aretz, from her lowly place, to be a wife to Yitzchak, Yitzchak being this holy, spiritual, pure sacrifice, and Rivka and Yitzchak are supposed to become united as one. As it says, a man cleaves to his wife and they become like one flesh. That's the greatest elevation possible that can be. Rivka and Yitzchak becoming united. And that represents the higher spheres and the lower spheres converging and uniting as one, which happens with all the mitzvahs that we do. Abraham sent him there.
That's my point. Why, of all places, would somebody so insightfully and understand it? It's like sending the guy from the most holy towns in Jerusalem
Well, first,
to Bangkok, sorry, cowboy.
Yeah, to find a wife. Yep. First of all, because Avraham wanted him to go back to his family. He said, although the area is not good and although the behavior there is not good, but we're talking about a family that I know the pedigree, they're my family, and I want you to bring somebody from my family, bring him back to my environment, and Yitzchak, by living with Yitzchak, she'll be good and they'll have a great family. But this was, now we have a deeper depth to it. The whole purpose was, this was a setup for what would later be the analogy of Hashem in all his majesty coming down to the lowliest world and forging a connection with the world and telling us to do mitzvahs with physical things in this world, which is not the case. That injects here in square brackets with the marriage of Avraham and Sara. They were both holy people. But first of all, it was before Avraham Avinu became the saintly person, the wholesome person that he became through the mitzvah of circumcision that Hashem gave him only when he was 99 years old. It was before they made this whole revolution of monotheism in Haran, etc. They got married. There's two opinions when he got married, whether he got married when he was 25, Avraham got married to someone when he was 25 or he was 50, but certainly it was before he became the great Avraham. And also, Avraham and Sarah were both together in the place of in the place of idolatry, in Terach's place. Before Terach did Teshuvah, they were all both living between idolaters. So you don't see this stark contrast between Abraham and Sarah, between Yitzchak and Rivka. Yitzchak's background and personal achievements of holiness, and Rivka's background, she was only 3, but where she was coming from was a place of lowliness. There we see this symbolic joining of the higher spheres, the lower spheres, and we know that Maaseh Avot Siman Labanim, what plays out in the earliest stages of our forefathers' life, becomes the sign, becomes the path in which the children are going to tread. They kind of prepare the subsequent path for the children. So we understand that this joining of impossibilities, of opposites, Yitzchak and Rivka, becomes what gives us the power, what introduces the concept of joining higher and lower, which is going to become manifest and apparent at the giving of the Torah. So now, paragraph 7 will understand, if we've explained the symbolism of Eliezer's mission as being something so central to Judaism, bringing Yitzchak and Rivka together was really about bringing Hashem and the world together later on in the giving of the Torah. Now we can understand why he was answered even quicker than the other two. We said Moshe, when he finished saying, let the earth open up, it opened up, and not before he finished saying it. Shlomo, when he finished saying, let Hashem show us that he wants this house, then the fire came down. Eliezer didn't even finish saying, let the right girl come out. He didn't even finish saying it, and the girl was coming out. Why? Because there's a special, what Eliezer was talking about was symbolic of his prayer that there should be this connection, which is really the connection of Torah. And the connection of Torah is even more when we talk about dveikos, when we talk about cleaving to Hashem. So we speak about the Beis Hamikdash being Hashem attached to the place, and the place becomes holy. We talk about the prophet of Hashem being attached to the mindset of the prophet, and the prophet manifests Hashem's will through him. Torah is even more, because let's understand. When we talk about the place that becomes the place of Hashem in the Beis Hamikdash, there's 2 things. There's the place, and after Hashem, and Hashem who pervades the place. When we talk about prophecy, there's the prophet and the word of Hashem that pervades the prophet, which is why we see that when we talk about a prophet, the prophet was not always prophesying. You talk about a prophet about before he prophesied, and then there's a stage where he is in the midst of his prophecy, and there's a stage of after prophecy. And now we know, for example, now there's no prophecy. So prophecy is not it's a state where Hashem connects to the world, but it's not a total oneness with the world, because there's before, after, during. It's metered. We talk about the Beis Hamikdash. Well, we know the second Beis Hamikdash, Hashem was there, but there were 5 major things lacking. And also, only 3 times a year the Jews came and were able to see Hashem's presence. By night, they didn't bring korbanos at night, which leads us to say that at night there wasn't this epic revelation. You didn't go in there at night. Especially now we talk about the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. Yes, okay, we say that it's still holy. We can't go there. It's still holiness. But definitely, you don't have that physical manifestation where you can go and see Hashem's presence. You go to Yerushalayim, the place where Beis Hamikdash is, you don't get a feeling, you don't get this feeling that the Jews used to get. They literally felt God. You don't get that. You can be inspired when you remember that Hashem's presence is there, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about going there, and it's like a chemical reaction. The Jew goes to the Beis Hamikdash, and you see that God is there. That's not there anymore. Because the connection of Hashem to space and to the Navi had to be, it was a new thing that was added to their existence. That's why it can sometimes be, and it can sometimes stop to be. Torah is something else. The unification of Hashem and Torah is a different thing, because Torah in its very origin is one with God. The Torah is the wisdom of Hashem. It doesn't start somewhere. It doesn't like have its own identity like the prophet is a physical identity, and now Hashem has to connect to it. Torah emanates from Hashem. In its very beginning, its oneness with Hashem is consummate. And that's why the Torah is always here. There's no change between before the destruction, after the destruction. The Torah is here, as the Rambam says, Omedet le'olam ul'olmei olamim ein lalo shinui v'lo giraon v'lo tosefet. It's here forever without any change. Because since the unification of Torah and with godliness, is in a way that it's totally like one thing. That's why the connection of the Jewish people and the world with godliness, the way it comes through Torah, is in a way that through Torah, Hashem and Yisrael are one. And also, we see that the world, here's a very powerful word about our world. The actual existence of the world, the way it's connected with Torah, is that not just is the world created before the Torah, in a way that they're two separate things, but actually the existence of the world is totally hinged on Torah. Like it says, when Hashem created the world, Hashem made a clause that if the Jewish people receive the Torah, the world will continue to be. If not, you know what would have happened if the Jews didn't accept the Torah at Sinai? The world not just would stop, the world would stop and be retroactively disappear as if it never was. So the Torah is so connected with Hashem. That's why the way the world is connected to Hashem through Torah, the way the Jewish people connect to Hashem through Torah, it's in a way where there's a cleaving, there's a oneness, there's an impossibility for any dislocation, for any tearing away. There's a wholesomeness here, which tells us that the world, you think about it, as difficult and as dark as the world is, the whole reason for the world is only because of the Torah, and only when there is a Torah do we have a world, which means at its very core, the world's a good thing. The world is there for us to be able to observe the Torah in. Externally, it looks like it's a challenge. That's a smoke screen. It's not. That's just to test us, and that's just to make a challenge for us. But at its core, the world is all about the expression of Torah, in the expression of God's presence in the world. And if the Jews wouldn't have accepted that mission, to carry out that mission in the world, sure, there's no world. The world is here for Torah, just not just for Torah. The world and the Torah are inseparable, which is why, therefore, the way Eliezer was answered about his davening about the shidduch of Yitzchak and Rivka is in an immediate way, because what he's talking about before he even finishes to daven, before he even finishes to speak. If it would only come after he finished to speak, that would show that there's a time that the oneness with Hashem is not consummated, is not complete. Yes, you're connected to the Shekhinah, and that's why Hashem answers immediately. But the connection, the dveikos, is like the connection of two separate things that are connected to each other. There's still a blur. There's still a hairline distinction between the two things that are connected. And that's why the answer would have been immediate, but right after he finished saying it. However, because the prayer of Eliezer is about Torah and its relationship with Yidden, Torah, the relationship with the world, and its relationship with Hashem, is that it's totally one, not like two things even connected, but totally one. That's why the answer comes in a way that he doesn't even finish speaking, even before he finishes speaking. It's so immediate, so one, so consummately integrated with Hashem. Paragraph 8. Now let's see something else. Till now we spoke about the fact that if something's totally connected, there's an immediacy. There can be an immediacy of answer. There doesn't need to be a handing over from one to the other, so to speak. Paragraph 8. When the pasuk says, "Vayhi uterem kiledaber," he hadn't yet finished speaking. Chassidus explains another aspect of this. But there's two modes of drawing down Hashem's energy into the world. And we see it in the pasuk that we say every day in davening, Hasholeach imrato aretz. Hashem sends down his utterance to the earth. In other words, Hashem is enlivening everything by sending his utterance down to earth. Ad meheira yarutz dvaro. His word runs very quickly, swiftly. And Chassidus explains there's two modes here. There's Hasholeach imrato aretz, Hashem who sends his utterance to the earth. That's the kind of delivery of energy that comes in a way of la'at, slowly, gradually, in an organized fashion. In other words, it goes through the chain of descent. There is what's called in Kabbalah Seder Hishtalshalut. There's the chain and order of organized, orderly descent from higher level to slightly lower level to slightly lower level to slightly lower level. Always a small diminishment and a transferal of the energy in an orderly sustainable way. And in each level where it stops, at that station, it kind of becomes integrated in that station, and then it goes down a little lower till it be able to come down here to earth, the lowest of the places. Then there's another kind of transmission of energy from Hashem, which is a quick one. It doesn't go through all the stops. It comes zoom, comes sliding straight down, jumping over all the usual, bypassing all the usual stops. Express. What's the difference between the express energy that Hashem sends down and the local and measured and metered energy? Is like this. When the depends where the level starts from. If the power of that godly energy starts from a level which is connected, a level that's higher than the world, but connected to the chain of descent, the ishtalshlus of the worlds, so then it comes down. It's so to speak, it's a palatable, it's a kind of an energy force of Hashem, Elikus, that is connected to the order of the world and comes down in an orderly way. If, however, we're talking about Hashem's power, which is lamala from ishtalshlus, higher than the chain, a very powerful revelation of Hashem, so then it bypasses the whole thing. It kind of forges its way through, pushes its way boom, through all the barriers and doesn't stop, and it comes all the way down without really becoming enclosed in each of the levels. So according to this concept in Chassidus, we explain why these three were answered right away. Because their prayer reached a place in emanation of Hashem, which is higher than the usual channel of descent. And therefore, because they reached through their prayer to a higher space than usually prayers reach, they're able to draw down an energy that whooshes down right away. It's not atzmut, it's l'mayla mishtalshel. There's many levels that are l'mayla mishtalshel. Keter or something like that. And according to this is also understood the advantage of the tefillah of Eliezer, which is even greater than the tefillah of Moshe and Shlomo. And that's why by Eliezer it says even before he finished speaking it came. Why? Because what's the purpose of Eliezer's davening is for Yitzchak to get married. But it's Yitzchak. What is Yitzchak? Yitzchak represents in Kabbalah gevurot. We know Yitzchak represents strictness. If Avraham is chesed, benevolence, giving, Yitzchak is strictness, he digs wells. But gevurot also means tigboret achayis, an abundance of energy, which in this case is talking about Hashem's energy in a way of tigboret, in a way of a whoosh. So when he davens, he also gets a response in the way of tigboret, not just a swiftness, but an accentuated swiftness, a force, a powerful force, which is represented by the gevura of Yitzchak. Terem kiladav, even before he finishes praying, he gets this energy sent down, gets the answer. We could say that this thing that the Rebbe has explained here in the Likut, as explained in the Likut Sichos, we can connect this to the thing we just now explained about being answered immediately. Has to do with what level you're reaching. If you're reaching higher than Ishtalshlus or Ishtalshlus. So from the perspective of the Seder Ishtalshlus, of the order of descent, so then the connection of Hashem, of Elikus, godliness, with the thing to which it becomes connected is like two separate things that get connected. And that's why there's a pause between the tefillah and the response to the tefillah. After when we talk about Hashem's light that's higher than Ishtalshlus, and here the Rebbe puts in Befrat mitzada atzmus, especially when we're talking about reaching Hashem's essential level, atzmus, so then at that level, at Hashem's deepest, so to speak, in Hashem's essence, the world is and Elikus and godliness are not two separate things. They're they're all as one, because we know that deep down the created yesh, the created being, is one thing, so to speak, with the yesh amiti, with the absolute true being, which is Hashem in his essence. But when we talk about reaching, we talk about such a high level at its source. So at its source, Hashem, there's just Hashem. And the world is all part of Hashem. And the contrary, there's a special correlation between Hashem's existence which is not hinged on anything else, and the fact that the world also feels that its existence is not hinged on anything else, and that the fact that Hashem's true intention is this world, so they're connected intrinsically, and therefore, when you reach that place in prayer, the prayer gets answered right away because it's all in proximity, not just in proximity, it's all attached and enmeshed and one with each other. So here, basically, we have the explanation how and why Eliezer's tefillah was answered immediately. Yeah.